Tom, we've been talking, of course, much of the afternoon, much of the day today about the passing of Guy Lafleur. Just wonder what your thoughts or memories might be.
As a kid growing up, never missing a Canadian hockey game, Lafleur is just so much part of our memory of those great teams. And I had the great chance, you do these things in politics, you go to these golf tournaments, and we were in the same foursome together. So we spent most of the day together. And you know what? What people are saying about him, like just the simplest, most down-to-earth person, he was just that. Zero pretense. And I can tell you, he wasn't that big a guy. He was maybe 5'11", maybe 6 feet tall. But even, then that was about, let's say, 10, 15 years ago. So he was probably in his mid to late 50s. He was still built so solid. And he had those forearms on him that looked like Popeyes, like you know where that slap shot came from. And he's just, like I say, one of the most agreeable people you'd ever want to meet.
Why do you think that it's not like that anymore, Tom? We were saying it's sort of like they just don't make them like that anymore.
I was with a colleague on the French side today, and he made a good observation. He says, it's the ones who are the greatest that seem to be the easiest to get along with, and they don't, they're not prima donnas, and they're not always putting on airs. But the ones who are sort of on the periphery, they're the ones who tend to be a bit harder to handle. Let's just put it that way. Whether it's in showbiz or in sports, and he's just the type of guy. He never let this go to his head. He was from a small town in Quebec. I was delighted because I'm pretty convinced that the family will agree to the national flag and state and the funeral. But at the same time, what a delightful idea to give Autoroute 50 his name. Mm-hmm. And it was, it's basically straight from the Laurentian Autoroute all the way over to where his family was in Thurso. So I think that's a great idea. It would be well deserved if they do it. They usually wait for a year after someone dies, but I think that giving a signal in that regard would be really welcome from everybody.
So, Tom, a week ago we were all losing our minds over the fact that Dominique Anglade had written an open letter that was only in the Journal de Montréal. Fast forward a week later, she has now written an op-ed in the Gazette talking about how her party, the Liberals, plan on standing up for all Quebecers. Give me your take on that.
Well, I think it's smart politics. I think that what she's doing is she's following through, because I have spoken to several people, who have long-standing roles in the English-speaking community, and they've actually had meetings with her. She's been reaching out, using her own contacts and connections to make sure that people understand that she gets their issues. And I think that that's something that had to be done. It was a very rough patch there a few weeks ago over this CEGEP issue, and the dust is finally starting to settle on that. And now people are looking at a fall election where, if this complete perfect storm in favor of François Legault continues, the division, almost impeccable division amongst four opposition parties, it'll be a cakewalk for Legault. And I don't think, in a democracy, I don't think it's great for anybody to have that much power. But the way things stand right now, if the Liberals, don't pick up their socks, they're going to have a hard time. The one advantage the Liberals do have is that there are a lot of seats that are pretty well guaranteed. Nobody else is going to win Chomedy, my old riding in Laval, except the Liberals. But right now, Chris Skeet, who's often on the show, he's just over there in Fabre, one over, and there are a couple of ridings in Laval that could topple to the CAQ if the Liberals aren't careful. So she's been doing a good job. Her thing yesterday, her Charte des Régions, so her charter to give the regions of Quebec, the far-flung regions, a bit of a break, was smart. She went right after Legault's pig-headed refusal to let in more immigrants, and she said, look, let's allow those regions to play a role in determining how many immigrants they want to come, because a lot of their major corporations, the big manufacturing concerns, they don't have enough workers, and it's bad for those regions. I think that was smart politics, frankly, and Legault doesn't have an answer for it because he's supposed to be all about the economy, but this is a clear, boneheaded move by Legault to refuse to have more people come to Quebec.
Back to the op-ed in the Gazette for a quick moment. I kind of feel like it seems like table scraps a bit, Tom. Like a whole week went by since the letter appeared in the Journal de Montréal, and it feels a bit like she's just trying to placate Anglos here.
I think that showing that you understand people's issues and that you're listening to them is always a good thing in politics. But, you have to, at some point, the people in the community who keep pushing for a new Anglo party are going to have to fish or cut bait, and they're going to have to come up with a cause. They're going to have to say, well, this is the reason that we're at war with the Liberal Party now, and I still haven't heard anyone articulate that reason so far.
Okay. Tom, let me move on. By the way, did you happen to hear Andrew Cadell on the show yesterday, right after you?
No, I
Okay.
didn't get a chance to hear him, unfortunately.
Well, you'll get a chance again today. He's joining us at 5:35.
Because we ran out of time
Yeah,
yesterday.
we didn't have enough time to get into it. But
So he's got a regular spot.
No, that
Tom?
Tom.
No regular spot. We just bring it up because he did happen to mention your name.
Of course.
So maybe listen today. We can talk about this next week. He's on at 5:35.
Looking forward to it.
Okay. Let me talk about the other story. Christian Dubé, our health minister. Look, we've had family doctors on the show. We've heard about how bad the situation is. People deciding, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm leaving, even after they've been in practice here for many years. Negotiations are going slowly, and we're starting to hear people suggest that, you know what, things need to speed up or else. What's keeping this from moving quicker?
Well, it's kind of interesting because we always talk about the College of Physicians and Surgeons, but that's the professional order. They're there to protect the public. Here in Quebec, we never have enough unions. We are, after all, the most unionized place in North America. So let's have more. So we've actually got doctors' unions, and they get to sit down. And the Union of General Practitioners here in the province of Quebec swings a mighty big bat. In fact, they've always been, the breaking point for getting things actually moving in the right direction in Quebec. I don't think that there's any fair accusation to make that Christian Dubé is holding things up. What they're actually saying right now is they're not getting everything they want, because Dubé knows that some of the deals that Gaétan Barrette made with the doctors' unions made no sense whatsoever. And that's why it's good to have a business person in there and a solid manager in Christian Dubé instead of the long series of medical doctors we had. Not that they weren't good people, they were certainly good doctors, but we had three ministers of health in Quebec who were doctors who held sway for the longest time, and the system actually got worse. Mm-hmm. So I think that we've got to cut some slack for Christian Dubé. I'm in Dubé's corner on this stuff. I think that the proposal that he brought forward was the most open-minded and the most reasonable and practical and realizable, something that actually be brought in, the series of proposals he made. So I think he should be given a fair chance here. I don't hold back on my criticisms of the CAC, but I think that Dubé is probably one of the brightest lights in that cabinet.
So if that's the case, though, Tom, why are doctors pushing back? Why do we hear from them one after the other saying, I don't like the idea?
This is a union negotiating. And like I say, especially the general practitioners here in Quebec, the head of that union is a really tough, Louis Laberge had nothing on this guy, okay? I mean, this guy's a union boss. And he uses every trick in the book in his negotiating tactics, and he's used to winning. And this is one of the tactics they use. They're going to go after the government. They're going to slag the minister. It's just this is just the softening up part of the debate, and then they'll get into the real tough part. They're going to try to hold this off as much as they can so that it'll come and annoy the government as much as possible in the middle of the election campaign. But I think that this might backfire for once on the general practitioners, who, frankly, should be part of the solution and not always be the ones saying that they want more and that they don't have to take part in any efforts to make the system better.
Okay.
Huh. Interesting. I was just thinking, with regards to Dubé being more of a businessman, you'd think that things would be moving along more quickly, more efficiently, especially when you point out that this could continue to haunt them into election time. But I guess...
But it's a negotiation. Mm-hmm. It's a negotiation, Natasha. Okay. And, they've got their negotiating technique on the union side, on the doctor's side, and part of their technique is to always say that the government's doing something wrong and to point to it and have very easy access to the media. And the government is going to be doing its job. But like I say, I mean, you have to take the measure of the person who's there. And ever since he has arrived in this file, Dubé has really shone. He's shown everybody that he understands. He's a listener, but he takes the tough decisions. The management of that ministry is way above anything I've ever seen in my lifetime. I was there for two of the main reforms that were proposed over the past few decades. I was the president of the Office des Professions du Québec, so the Quebec Professions Board, at the time of the Marc-Yvan Côté reform. I mean, he had this big meeting in the round. It was wonderful, the best communications effort you've ever seen, and it was going to redo, razzle-dazzle, everything. The thing was launched with great fanfare, and nothing ever came of it. And I was also involved directly with him, with Jean Rochon, for his reform in that role at the Office des Professions. And he went through everything. He came up with this massive report. We were going to have what he was calling a major transformation to ambulatory care. This was going to be the big thing. But the money never followed. It's not that the ideas weren't good. The ideas were actually great. But it never went anywhere. So, I mean, this is the difference with, I believe, Christian Dubé, who's taken stock of the real issues, laid them out in clear terms, and said, this is a modest approach. These are things that I'm going to do. Here's a dozen things that I will change, and he's going to do it.
Okay. I want to just touch on one other thing. I brought up the Pierre Poilievre thing, which you hadn't seen at this point, I guess, yesterday afternoon, trying to excuse his way out of owning rental properties and his wife. What do you think now that you've seen it?
Well, I think he's giving a pretty good answer. But my first observation is, hey, welcome to that magnificent, huge glass house that is elected politics. Because he's out there more than he's ever been. You know, he was always a bit of an obscure, bit kooky backbencher, you know, with his own odd way of looking at things, and nobody really cared about what Pierre Poilievre said. Now he's the front runner, according to a lot of polls, in the Conservative race. I think that Chavin and others will eventually have more to say about who actually wins this thing. But right now the numbers show that he's sitting pretty. So he's been out there complaining about housing. Some of his adversaries have been combing through his stuff and said, here's one of the causes of high housing prices in Canada. And so they've thrown it right back at him. I don't think it's going to stick. I don't think that the guy's done anything wrong. But it's just a reminder, Aaron and Natasha, that when you're in politics, you better be careful how many stones you throw in that glass house, because there's going to be a lot of broken windows.